Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark, and professionally, I'm a lifestyle financial planner. I typically work with women in finance, helping them identify, achieve, and maintain the lifestyle they want without the fear of running out of money. Personally, I'm married to my beautiful wife, Nicole. I'm the father to my two amazing kids, Luke and Sephora. And my family really is my purpose. So the reason that I do what I do, and we're on our journey to building our best lives together. And I'm really blessed that this is the work that I get to do for my clients, helping them live their best life. Our guest today is Shannon Gernetzky. Most of you know Shannon on the call, which is quite cool. But professionally, Shannon is the proud co-owner of the Brace of Pheasants, a traditional country pub restaurant with guest rooms located in the beautiful hamlet of Plush. Shannon recently transitioned out of her corporate role as executive sector head for industrials at Standard Bank, where she spent 25 years of her life building a varied, challenging, and rewarding career. Personally, Shannon's a mom to her dashing little son, Jonah, who now calls her mummy and forgets to say tea on water, much to her dismay. She's a wife to her, I call him a mischievous husband, Matthew, who's her partner and co-owner in the business, and he's responsible for the day-to-day running of the Brace of Pheasants. Shannon loves a good meal, loves a glass of wine, and is one of the most selfless people that I know. She's also a tough cookie, right? And I know this because we've worked together for quite some time now. And she's someone I'm glad to call not only a client, but also a good friend. So Shannon, thank you for joining us today and sharing your story. Just some quick housekeeping before we get going. As you may know by now, we keep these things very informal. We welcome all your questions at any point in time. You can send it through via the Q&A function. We'll address it when it comes up, or we'll address it at the end. No PowerPoint, just a conversation between Shannon and I. So we'll try to keep it to around 45 minutes, leave questions for the end, or we'll address it in the beginning and run all the way through to the end. So just before we kick things off, as we do, we thought we would start with a poll. And given the topic of today, we're going to ask you, are you considering leaving the corporate world and going out on your own? Yes, no, and the obvious, it's a really scary option. Yeah, so maybe while we wait for that to come in, Shannon, going out on your own, did you think that would be something that you would be doing after 25 years in the bank?
You know, and I thought about it many times, but I don't know if I ever really thought I would do it. You know, it was hard to visualize my life outside of what it had been for so long. So, you know, while part of me always thought, what else might I do? I don't know if I really ever thought that I would do it. And, you know, if I hadn't moved country, I probably wouldn't have made the kind of the wholesale lifestyle change that I've made.
Yeah. Okay, before we get into that, because you're giving away the good bits, let's just have a look at those poll results quickly. Oh, wow. So 50% of the people are looking at going out, and 11 say no, but they're just here to hear you speak, right? And then 39 say it's really scary, and I'm pretty sure you can attest to how scary it really is, Shannon, which we'll dive into. So thanks so much for sharing, guys. I think let's kick it off with the start. Shannon, how did you get to the level you did in your career? You know, what did it take to get there? I know a bit of it, but you know, there must have been sacrifices along the way. So let's maybe start there.
Okay, cool. So I joined Standard Bank Corporate and Investment Banking on their first grad program in 1997. So really a lifetime ago. Sure. And although I spent 25 years with one organization, I really had a varied career, and I performed different roles across client coverage, risk, investment banking. mostly in South Africa, but I did spend 18 months on secondment in London. And much of my career was spent supporting clients, both in South Africa and the rest of the African continent. So really varied from both a geographic and a product perspective. When I look back and think about how I progressed, I firstly have to acknowledge and appreciate the opportunities that I was given. Just about every time that I put up my hand for something new or bigger responsibilities that came my way, obviously sometimes also when I didn't put up my hand, but you know, that was the context. But it didn't come easy, as you say.
Yeah.
It was hard.
I was just going to stop you there. You definitely want to put up your hand, right? But they're only going to pick you if you've proven your ability to do it, right? So hard work, dedication, long hours.
No, exactly. And you know, very much at Standard Bank, the responsibility for personal career development is your own. Obviously, the organization provides the appropriate support, but it's your responsibility to drive it. And I did that from the beginning. You know, I remember asking for a salary increase in my first year or two as a very young 20, 21-year-old. I motivated for my managerial promotion. I'm motivated later for my executive promotion. I asked to be moved to risk. I asked to go to London and then to come back to South Africa. When we went through our restructuring and retrenchment process in 2013, 2018, 2014, I had to motivate and basically apply for my position coming out of that process. I asked to go on the Gibbs Global Executive Development Program. You know, I volunteered to pilot new projects and to drive change processes. And it was hard work. And it was, as you say, long hours. And that included weekends and holidays and many personal sacrifices. You know, I prioritized my work, my clients, my team, and that was often at the expense of time with family and friends, and definitely at the expense of other personal goals. And, you know, it kind of was on this treadmill, and I kept going. And yes, there were many times over my career where I asked myself, is it all worth it? Or should I be doing something else? But, you know, I always came back to the fact that while I worked really hard for the bank treated me well. And I actually enjoyed what I did.
Yeah, before we get into that, what I'm hearing, Shannon, is you took control of your career, right? You didn't kind of just let it happen and, you know, float through. You really steered the direction that you wanted to go in. If you look back, right? Maybe at the time you didn't know where you were headed, but you put your hand up for things. I want this. You know, I'm glad you said that you asked them for an increase at 22. So that's just in you, right? So we know the type of person that you are. It's not just you giving me a hard time all the time. But it's, you know, I think that's really important, right? So whether you're going to step out of your corporate role or stay in corporate, if you want to progress and get to a level that you want to get to, you've got to take control. You know, you've got to have the determination to do the things you need to do when you need to do them, right?
Standard Bank, you've got to deliver, you've got to perform.
Yeah.
Doesn't just happen.
Yeah, and it looks like, you know, they're putting even more so a lot more emphasis on career development. And like you say, they provide all the opportunity, but you've got to take the bull by the horns and go with it. Okay, so I'd like to touch on some of the sacrifices, Shannon. Like, I remember when we met, you were like super determined, right? It was like you were hardcore when we first met, and over the years you've kind of eased up a little bit. But you know, you were determined and you were focused and you worked hard and you got rewarded for it. But you know, you touched on it briefly, like there were sacrifices to your personal life, I would say.
Yeah, there definitely were sacrifices, and sometimes when you're in it, you don't even realize it. And I think I'll touch on some of these later in our conversation, but there were a few times over my career where I, you know, had some introspection and realized the sacrifices that I was making, and really had to question what I was doing and what was really important to me. And, everyone that knows me well knows that, that's known me for a long time, knew that I wanted to have a family of my own. I wanted to have somebody to share life experiences with. I wanted to be a mom. But for many years, I didn't do anything about that. I just worked. And, I often joked that unless Mr. Right fell from the ceiling above my desk, I was never going to meet anybody. And, it was only later, as you say, I kind of eased up. And I think that experience of me easing up a bit was as a result of me really kind of questioning and changing my perspectives and doing something different. And at some stage, I actually made the conscious decision that if I say all these things are important, I actually my behavior needs to reflect that. I need to do something about it. And I had to change. I had to change how I balanced the relative importance of work relative to the other important goals in my life. And, at some stage, I made the decision to do things differently. And that's when I met Matthew, and, my life took a different kind of course.
Shan, there's two questions that have come up regarding work-life balance and burnout. Did you ever experience burnout in your corporate career? Did it ever get to that level?
Yeah, it did. I know for sure it happened once. I'm sure it happened more, I think it happened more than once, but I really, I remember one particular time where I was sitting in a client meeting with a very senior executive of the bank. It was a really important meeting. It was quite a long time ago, so I was still probably relatively young. And we were in the meeting, and I just felt my heart beat. It felt like I was having a heart attack. And it probably was an anxiety attack, which, that's different, but it's related to burnout. I had just pushed myself so far, and I wasn't looking after my personal well-being, and, that kind of culminated in that. And there were other times over my career where I didn't necessarily experience burnout completely, because as I progressed, I actually started to, I was aware, and I knew what the telltale signs were of kind of oncoming burnout, and I became better at managing myself.
I think like that first anxiety attack, once you can deal with it, it's almost a curse, right? Because you can anticipate it coming on.
Exactly.
And you then kind of deal with it, but it doesn't deal with the burnout that's happening in the back end, right? You just managing the anxiety better. There's another question on work-life balance, and there wasn't much, right, at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think work-life balance is theoretical, and it's actually not something that is achievable. And, when you're working in a corporate environment with the pressures of that corporate environment, and when you have the type of personality that actually brings on more of those pressures, it's really difficult to maintain a work-life balance. Where I'm sitting now, I have a very different environment, and now I can honestly say I experience work-life balance. I'm much more in control of it now, and it's a completely different context. So it does depend, what you're doing and where you find yourself. But I think if it is something you aspire to, you've got to consciously actually prioritize and drive that for yourself, because it definitely doesn't happen. And, it's natural. If you're a performer, the place where you work is going to, drive you to get as much as value as they can out of you. And, especially in the kind of the financial services corporate environment, it's an adrenaline rush. It's almost like a high. Your achievement fuels more, drive for more achievement. And even though you're exhausted and you're working long hours and you're moaning about everything you have to do, that closing a deal and doing something exciting with a client it drives you, and you keep pushing yourself. So it's kind of addictive in a way, and you need to be able to step back and look at your life and say, okay, are you really putting your energy into everything that's really important to you. And if you're not, what do you need to change to make sure that you are kind of fueling all of those things and not just one?
Yeah, I think, it's, you touched on it, but the corporate's going to do everything they can to get the best out of you, right? And if you show how much you can deliver, they will keep pushing to get more from you. But it's not for nothing, right? They did reward you,
exactly,
and that's what keeps fueling it, right? So they keep rewarding, and you keep going, and they keep rewarding, and you keep going until something happens, right? So that's where we're going next. What happened? What shifted?
So, and you've kind of alluded to it, that the change kind of started happening a while ago. And, I referred to the 2013, 2014 restructuring and retrenchment process that we went through. And that was really the most difficult time for me in my career. And it made me realize that my identity was too connected, too wrapped up with the bank. I experienced a bit of a career setback, but I used that to really step back and determine and prioritize what was really important to me. And that didn't mean that I started to put less than 100% into my job. It meant that I started focusing on channeling my efforts on things that created value for both the bank and for me. And personally, like I said earlier, I realized that that the things that I said were most important to me, like having my own family, I was doing nothing. I was putting no energy into that. And so I consciously created space for myself and my goals outside of work. And, that started a journey where I met Matthew, married Matthew, and had my son, Jonah. There's obviously a lot that happened in between, but two key things happened in the last couple of years that really changed my perspective and acted as the catalyst for me to retire from Standard Bank and, embark on a completely change in lifestyle. The first was, as I said, Jonah was born. He was born in May 2019. And that was after a really intense, almost 3-year IVF journey. So that was the first thing. The second thing was COVID. And I think for a lot of people, the pandemic really made me look at my life, appreciate my life, and change my perspective on a lot of things. As much as I loved my work, and I really, really did, I knew that my ultimate priority is my son. And he was growing so quickly and so beautifully. And I knew that there's only a small window for me to really enjoy this amazing time with him. So at the beginning of COVID, when Matthew was retrenched, that just acted as the catalyst to fast track what thoughts we had of maybe one day immigrating and doing something completely different. Matthew had always had a passion for hospitality, and I had the opportunity to get into the UK through my family ancestry. And so at the beginning of 21, we applied for and got our visas. We sold up everything in South Africa. We said our goodbyes. We moved to the UK. We looked for, found, bought traditional country inn, and we set up our roots in Dorset.
I think, you speak of a catalyst, and I know the planning that we had done, but before you had Jonah and once you had married Matt, so in that period of your life, a exit out of South Africa was always a plan B.
Yeah.
Right? And we planned for it, and you guys, or Matt, led this one avenue that he went down with Slovenia and everything, and you let him do that, but it was just a plan B, right? So you weren't too phased about how long it took or if it happened, and it wasn't this big shift in life that was coming. You weren't going to leave South Africa to go live in Slovenia. It was pretty, but it wasn't forever. Then you had Jonah, and I think you were still COVID. When did you have Jonah?
2019. So it was just before 6 months, basically before COVID.
Before COVID. And had you gone back to work post Jonah, pre-COVID, back to the office?
Yeah. So I was working from home.
Okay.
So I went to the office. You're right. I did go back to the office first. So I went back to the
Yeah.
office in like October, November 2019. And then obviously we were working by March 2020, we were working from home.
Yeah. So you got to experience like the maternity leave with Jonah. You went back to the office. You sort of realized what you're, well, working mom, like in an office. And then you had to come home, right? And then you got to experience life with Jonah while you were working at home.
Yeah.
And you saw all the cool things that you ordinarily wouldn't have seen, right? And you would have missed out on because you were at home. Luckily.
It was like the best gift from COVID.
Yeah, it's. I think it's amazing because if you hadn't have experienced that, you probably wouldn't have made the decision, right?
Yeah, you know, everything just kind of happened at the same time. So you're right. You know, I was so fortunate to be able to see things that I wouldn't have seen if I was sitting in the office in Rosebank. And as much as that was amazing, it did make me think there's so much more that I actually, because I'm, as much as I can see it, I'm not part of it because I am stuck in my office. I was a disciplined employee. I had my office. I went there every morning.
Employee. Right?
I worked until 5. You know, I broke for half an hour to give my helper a break so that she could have lunch. But you know, so I could see things happening, but I wasn't a part of it, and I wanted to be a part of it. And also, you know, it maybe sounds bad to admit, but when Matt was retrenched, I could see what he was doing or hear about the things that he was doing with Jonah. And I was jealous. You know, I was honestly jealous because he was living my dream. That's what I wanted. You know, that's what I always had wanted. And yeah, I was being the breadwinner and working all hours of the day and night, even if I did stop at 5 to, you know, sort out Jonah's food and bath and whatever. There were many nights I'd then have to carry on, you know, sitting on the couch while Matt's watching his movie and I'm, you know, carrying on working. And, you know, I was jealous of the time that he had with Jonah and I wanted that.
Yeah, that's quite refreshing to hear you actually say that, right? You were building the life, but he was living the life that you wanted to live.
Yeah.
And it probably would have carried on, right?
Yeah, it probably would have. But what we've also realized is we all have, you know, as much as we're one family unit and we work towards a common vision, we have our own personal dreams within that. And as much as, you know, Matt, you know, he loved that time with Jonah and it's built the most amazing foundation and bond between father and son. That wasn't his dream, you know, it wasn't his dream to be daddy daycare. And he couldn't wait to actually say, here you go, this is literally your baby. I'm going to go and run the pub.
And I think it's awesome. You know, you were there at a time, Matt was there at a time when Jonah needed him. And he got to experience that. And you're there at a time now where Jonah needs and wants you. It's not so much about needing you now. He actually wants to spend time with you. And there's going to be a time where he doesn't want to spend time with you. And then you can go do whatever it is that you want to do at that time, right? So I think it's again, it's that you purposefully created this environment. There's just one thing I want to touch on before we move is you did have Jonah quite late, typically late on in life, right?
It's your nice way of saying I'm old.
No. What I want to actually get to is that, you know, we've got the stereotype in our lives which say at 30 or 33 or whatever, that number's slightly moving up, you have to have had kids because it's impossible and you have to be at this stage. You know, but that wasn't necessarily your case, right? You did things slightly different and it still worked out for you, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously risks in it and there's trade-offs along the way. So, you know, as much as I wanted to be a mom, that was what I wanted more than anything else. I've always wanted that more than anything else. I also wanted a career, and it just so happened, you know, life panned out so that my career came first in my life, and it was very consuming. And so, you know, I got sucked into this corporate kind of life, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't just hard work. You know, I met most of my closest friends I met in the bank. You know, we worked really hard together. We traveled overseas together. We had fun together. And so I really had a great life. And I would often say, before I met Matthew, I'd often say, and I love my life. If I meet someone, they must make my life better, which is a really hard ask, because, you know, I don't want to give up this great life that I have. But at the same time, you know, I definitely always wanted to be a mom. And so, you know, it was amazing. It was great that I met Matthew, and, you know, and we had a great time traveling and having fun together before Jonah, but we were very much on the same page in terms of wanting a family. And in a lot of ways, it worked out. Having a child later has worked out great, because, you know, we've built a financial foundation that we can do things like move to the English countryside and give him a lifestyle that he wouldn't have had in South Africa. We can give him opportunities. So there's definite upside to having a family later. But the downside is, biologically, it's complicated. Okay, and you don't always you don't think about that when you're chasing your career and you're working the long hours, and you're not actually putting yourself first. You don't think about that. And so when the time came to have Jonah, it wasn't just, I want to have a baby, so I'm going to have a baby. You know, we realized we had fertility issues, and very early on we went for help. And as I say, it was an almost 3-year intense journey, and it was emotionally intense and physically intense. And, you know, it was hard in lots of ways. It was hard for me personally, because it was, you know, I went through some real challenges and losses along that way, which were really difficult and hard to deal with. And probably even more difficult because you've got to come to work the next day and still try and be the best version of yourself. And it's hard. And it was hard on our relationship. It was hard on our finance. You'll know, it's not a cheap thing to do. So it was hard. So as much as, you know, as I say, there's always trade-offs, and there's definitely upside to having a child later, but it was a journey.
Yeah. And Andrea just said, congratulations on not giving up and carrying on and pursuing it, because it's clearly worked out for you. So
thank you.
Throw that in there.
We never give up.
That's I was going to say, you know, it must be hard to be the person who puts their hand up and gets the promotion. Now you're putting your hand up for a baby, and then like, well, listen,
maybe not.
It's not going to be that simple. Okay, so being so meticulous, how did you do this, right? How did you transition out, and what gave you the comfort and the courage to go ahead with it and actually do it?
Well, Mark, you and I have been working together for, I didn't realize it, kind of nearly 10 years. So crazy. You can see I'm a very loyal person. I don't ever leave.
Well, she gets really great service. I don't know.
Yeah, that too. Anyway, so, you know, we have an ongoing conversation about how to manage finances to support personal lifestyle goals. I mean, there's not a start and a stop. We have an ongoing conversation about it. So when Matt and I, you know, were seriously thinking about immigrating, we obviously came and chatted to you, and together we did scenario planning. And Mark knows I love scenario planning. It probably is the bane of his life. But, you know, we looked at, well, what did good look like? What happened if we bought a business and failed? What did we need from a business for it to wash its own face and support our lifestyle? How did our retirement planning have to change to take into account that we now have a different liquidity position? We're in a different country, a different cost of living. You know, so we ran the numbers, and we ran them in different ways. And as much as that was quite daunting in some ways, you know, when you're used to seeing the numbers looking a certain way and kind of think it's going to look like that always, and then you throw this big kind of pigeon into that and take out a huge chunk of liquidity, it does kind of give you a nervous breakdown. But at the same time, seeing how the numbers stacked up it gave us the comfort to say, you know, okay, it's going to look different, but it's going to be okay. And so, you know, we can do it from a financial perspective. And I think that, together with Matt's passion and energy for, you know, taking on this business venture and wanting to run it as his own. That really gave me the confidence to kind of say, okay, well, I can do this too. You know, I can create a reality that fulfills my dream as well, where I can be productive, but I can also maximize time with Jonah, which is really what I wanted to do.
I remember the first time we ran one of the scenarios, and we called it GBP Life. And we took everything that you and Matt had created over this life and we divided it by 20.
Yeah.
And then it was like, that was the first anxiety attack. What's happening here? And then I remember those scenarios where, you know, Matt had these illustrious ideas of buying of this business and that business, and you know, he's the dreamer and you're the realist, and the two of you meet in this perfect place, which just really makes everything work. But he would say, okay, we're going to go buy this, and then you would kind of, from a planning perspective, say, what if it fails completely, Mark? And Matt and I would look at each other. It's not going to do that, but you know, you needed that peace of mind to say, if we lose all of this, are we still okay? Because you were giving up your safety net at the bank. You know, you're giving up this corporate career. You're giving up all the hard work that you had worked for, and all the rewards were going to stop. You know, so there was no more safety net, really. So you really needed that comfort of knowing what would happen in a worst case scenario.
Yeah. And I'm a planner. You know, I love spreadsheets. I love lists. That's the kind of person that I am. And so that's a process that I needed to go through. And it's not to say it's a crystal ball, because the reality is something else completely different that we didn't plan for could happen. But, you know, it does give you that comfort to make sure that you're going through the planning. And also, you know, you've just made me think of something else. You know, beyond the financial, it's you've got to spend the time really understanding what it is that you want, what your goals are, why you are doing something. And you know, at the time when I first went to my boss to say, you know, this is what we're thinking of doing, I think his first thought was, "You mad? You're absolutely crazy," which he didn't say to me. But what he did say to me is, "Shannon, I want you to think really hard about why you're doing this. Not just why you're doing this for Matt, not just why you're doing this for Jonah, but why are you doing it for you? Does it make sense for you?" And you know, I hadn't even really thought of that until that point in time. And I went through a process of coaching, and I went through that thought process. And in that, you know, in that process of really getting into my own head, realized actually I am doing this for me. It's actually really selfish. It's actually something I've been wanting to do for such a long time, but for whatever reason didn't have the motivation that I needed to do it, or even the confidence to do it. And you know, this whole change is allowing me to realize my own personal dream. So you know, it's both the numbers and the really understanding what is important to you and what are your own personal goals.
Something that's coming to me now from our conversations is, you know, we'd often run the scenarios while you were still employed and project these things out till 100, and everything was hunky-dory, you know. And we'd often say, what's it all for? You know, when is enough enough? Like, what is the purpose? Where are you going with this? And I think for a long time, it was hard to actually answer that question. Like, what is it for? You know, for so long you had known all of this. This is what you knew and you did, and how you behave. You know, doing this, going through this process and having these conversations with Matt and following that passion sort of allowed you to understand what it was all for, really.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you know, when I look back on it now, I'm so grateful for the fact that I've had a successful career, and you know, and I made some, not all perfect, but I made some good financial decisions that put me in a position where I could make the decision to leave a 25-year career and start, you know, on my own from scratch. So you know, I think one of the things, we've gone through that journey.
You say you made some really good financial decisions, and the thing that comes back to me is that it's not because of me, and it's not because of the investment returns that you got, right? Because you're super cautious, Shannon, right? It was through diligent savings, right? So we may have shown you things and guided you, but you did all the hard work. You saved diligently, right? And that's within your control. So another thing is, you figured it out and you took control about how you were going to do things.
Yeah. And that, that also changed over you'll know that has changed and kind of morphed over time, because, I also, and it probably makes sense, earlier on in my career, I was really focused on savings. And I think I was driven by, pursuit of financial security, almost at the detriment of all else. And that has morphed over time, where I'm still worried about financial security, and I'm still relatively responsible with finances, but it's not for nothing. It's not for this. It's not to just have a safety net. It's not to, be able to have the freedom to leave a corporate job one day. It's to support a lifestyle that I want and that I enjoy. I love eating out. I love traveling. I love living a good life. And it's to, how do you manage your finances to support the things that you want to do with the people that you want to do them with.
It's giving your money purpose.
Exactly.
What is the purpose for this money? How does it add value in your life?
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the next chapter. What is it like going from a corporate soldier, as I call you, to running your own business now?
So it's like where I am now.
In the UK.
So, and I think it's important. It's important to acknowledge that it's not easy. Okay, as much as it sounds like a bit of a fairy tale, what we've done, it was really hard. Especially at the beginning, for a number of reasons. It was really hard for me to leave the bank. After 25 years, severing that, I experienced a real loss. I felt a loss of my team, my clients, my day-to-day engagement, my sense of self-worth, my sense of financial security. I experienced a real loss, and this was at the same time as being in a foreign country, in the rural countryside, in the middle of winter, with no family, no friends, no support. It was challenging, to say the least. And there were many moments, low moments, where I thought, have we not made the biggest mistake of our lives? Overnight, I've gone from being a motivated, respected corporate executive, and now I'm a single parent and a domestic worker, because there's no one to help me at home. Matt's working all hours of the day. And it was really hard. And but someone at the time said to me, a change like this is like a bridge. It's a long bridge, and when you start, it seems impossible. But at some point you look back and you think, oh, I've actually reached the top of this bridge, and I'm feeling comfortable in my new reality. And that's where I am now. It's a completely new reality. What I do on a day-to-day basis is completely different to what I did before. And I think we'll chat a bit about it in a few minutes. There's some things that I miss, but there's a lot I don't miss. And, I'm quite settled and happy in this new life and my new roles. Not one role. I'm not just a corporate banker anymore. Now I'm a few different things.
Yeah, you're not defined by your corporate career anymore. Right?
Yeah.
How have you and Matt gone about defining who does what? And were you clear on that from the beginning, or was it a bit of trial and error? Because, what you guys knew about running a business from the onset,
we didn't.
let alone a business that has a restaurant, that has rooms, that has property, how did you separate that?
So, now you've reminded me of that moment, which I will bring up, which you haven't brought up. So anyway, before we left, as you say, it was all very theoretical. So we did have these conversations, and we did talk about what was Matt's dream versus what was my dream, and how those come together. And I was adamant to make it actually quite clear, because I didn't want us to get here and have a complete kind of misunderstanding or difference in opinion as to how we wanted to run our lives. So before we left, not, as you said, not that we had any idea of what the detail would entail, but we had a conversation, and I said to Matt, and we agreed, Matt's dream was to run a pub stroke restaurant with rooms. That was his dream. He wanted to be in the front side of that, engaging with the customers, behind the bar, serving tables, dealing with the staff, putting the menus together, being in the community of the client. That's what energizes Matt, and that's what he wanted.
Yeah.
And as much as I come from a client background, it's a very different client background. And hospitality is not my passion. It's not my dream. So it's quite difficult to kind of have two very different perspectives and dreams. But, I'm business minded, and I knew I could add value in terms of driving a successful business. And so I was very happy to manage the finances, the marketing, etc. And that's very much what I do. Obviously working with Matt, because it's a small business, so everything is intertwined. But I was clear, I didn't want to be serving tables and cleaning rooms. That was not what I was kind of coming here to do. And my priority is Jonah. So Jonah comes first, and my time and his needs come first. And secondly is the role that I play in the business and whatever else that I do. So we did have that conversation up front. Having said that, at the beginning of the year, it was like Jan, Feb. It was in the middle of winter. I was really struggling with that transition after leaving the bank. So it wasn't my happiest self. And we were having staff issues. We were just struggling to find staff. And our cleaner got COVID, and she was really struggling with the effects of COVID, and she had to resign. So the one day we were all at the inn, all stuck in turning over the rooms. And I was literally scrubbing a dirty toilet. That's the nicest way to say that. And there were tears running down my face. And I said, this is not what I signed up for. And, it was probably the darkest but most enlightening moment, because as much as I'm fully invested in the business, and, it's in my own personal interest and our joint interest that I support the success of the business, that moment reminded me of our conversations about who was going to be doing what, and what we came over here to do. And not only, what was, like I said, Matt's dream or the reason we came over for Jonah, but also what was my commitment to myself in terms of my reasons for coming over. And coming out of that moment, it was kind of a turning point for me, because from that point I really, I had the conversation with Matt, which I needed to, and then I focused my energies on doing the things where I can bring the biggest value to our business and our lives, but also myself. So kind of it just reaffirmed that reason for why we're here, and that commitment to my own personal goals. And needless to say, I have not cleaned another toilet.
Thank you. I think it must be very easy to kind of get lost in what's going on, right? You've moved, you've got this business that needs to be, let's not say profitable, it just needs to look after itself, right? You've often said hospitality is no way to become a millionaire.
Definitely not.
Post this move. But going through it, you're kind of just in it, and when things get tough, you get in. But I think having that introspection again to say, why did I make this move, right? Why did I step out of the corporate world? Why did I step into this world? And what am I trying to achieve from this?
And look, you've got to do what you've got to do. I mean, that's the reality. But you need to be mindful not to lose yourself in the process.
I think, one conversation we had, you told me you don't see Matt, right? He works all hours, and it's necessary that he works those hours for the business to run. But then the time that he's not working, you're working, or you're with Jonah, and you're just completely missing each other. And we had a conversation about, well, what you wanted? And it was no, right? And you need to kind of go back to that and understand what it is that you wanted.
Yeah. And like you say, you know, when you go into a venture like this, there isn't, yes, you can do lots of research, but there isn't a book that says, this is how it's going to be, and these are the steps that you have to take. So you've got to learn from experience. And the importance, I think, is just to be aware and to act. So, you know, we came into this and we put everything into it, and Matt put everything into it. I mean, you've seen Matt lost 10 kgs within a very short space of time because he's just busy all the time. And, you know, he's on the go all the time. And he's doing what he needs to make the business successful. But at the same time, we also need to, you know, stop and remind ourselves that we're not just in it to make a successful business. We're in it to make a successful life. And we're learning as we're stumbling. And so, you know, like you say, we got here, I never saw Matt, and we had to stop and say, okay, our days off, we can't use them to be, you know, to be working all the time, you know, because it's easy. When you're running your own business, it's easy to work all the time. You know, we talk about long hours in corporate. It's very easy to have longer hours when you're running your own business. But it's important to know, well, why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? And to make those changes. And so, you know, along the way, we've made those changes. Like we've said, okay, our days off are our days off. They are the days we go away for a weekend, or, you know, we go to a nice new restaurant, or we go to the beach, or whatever it is. And so we make sure that we commit to that family time together. So it's a bit unorthodox, you know, in terms of we were used to that 9 to 5, though not so much, a working day, and the Saturday, Sunday weekends. Our lives have turned upside down. Our weekends are now Mondays and Tuesdays. But, you know, we're learning to work within that.
Two things. Maybe there's an opportunity to write a book on how to do this, right? Because I'm pretty sure that would sell. And I forgot what the second thing is. But okay, so do you love it? Do you hate it? Is this it for the Gernetzky family?
So yes and no. You know, if I think about what are the things that I miss, there's lots of things about the job, the corporate job I miss. I miss the people, I miss the energy, I miss the engagement, but I don't miss the bureaucracy and the egos and the politics. There's things about this lifestyle that I don't like, or I didn't like to start off with. Like when we first got here, driving in the narrow country lanes in the dark afternoons of winter was like horrendous, but I've mastered that, so that's not a problem anymore. As you said, you know, I don't like that I don't get to see much of Matt, and I really miss the fact that he doesn't cook dinner for me anymore. My husband's a really good cook. Now I have to cook. But as I say, you know, we're working out how to maximize our time together. I don't like that there's no domestic help here. It's really hard coming from South Africa not to have domestic help. I really miss Shupe. Obviously, I miss family and friends, but we've been really lucky. We've had a constant flow, literally a constant flow of visitors. Since
well, you literally own an inn, right? So people can come and stay.
Yeah, it's really easy. But what I love, I'm surrounded by natural beauty. It is a beautiful place in the world to live. And I love the sense of security that I have. I don't have the stress of worrying about personal security for myself or my son. I love that. I love the community. You know, I didn't even know that this was coming with the business. We are so fortunate that we've bought a business in a village that's been so welcoming and so supportive, and the people have become our friends, not just our customers. And we're actually looking to build a house in that village because, you know, we want to be part of it. And, you know, I love that I'm my own master more so than I've ever been. You know, yes, there's always deliverables and things that have to be done and things that aren't that interesting that have to be done. Like I now need to do quarterly VAT returns and, you know, lovely administrative things that I never had to do before. but on a day-to-day basis, I've got more freedom to decide what I want to do. And I'm just absolutely loving the time with Jonah and watching him grow and literally learn new things every single day. Oh, and what's next? You asked, is this it for the Gernetzky family? Short answer is don't know. Not too worried about it though. The plan is we'll probably do this for 5 years or so and then reassess. If we're still loving it, we'll carry on. We're not loving it so much, we might look to sell, do something else, maybe somewhere else. It's really going to depend on Matt, whether he's still got the passion and energy for running this business. It's going to depend on where Jonah is and how he's doing. And it's also going to depend on what I'm doing. You know, maybe I'm fully involved in the business. Maybe I'm doing something else. You know, I'm open to opportunities. You know, as Jonah spends more time at school and I've got more time to myself, you know, maybe I'll take a different career path. Who knows? So we're going to just take it as it comes. In the meantime, we'll continue planning, we'll continue saving, we'll continue those scenario analyses. We'll travel, and you know, we'll live a good life, hopefully.
Yeah, it's amazing. Something that came up for me is you spoke a lot now about community well-being, and I think it's something you don't know about until you have it. You know, when you lived in Parktown North, I think it was called Parkwood. That's it. You know, you lived in a beautiful house in a beautiful area, but there was no sense of community, right?
Yeah.
And once you experience that sense of community, you almost like, how did I live without this? It's so nice to have nature around you and have nice people around you, and what that feeds your soul it's almost priceless once you've experienced it.
Yeah, and it's like just a little anecdote there, and it is a cliche, but you know, you hear when you have children, you hear these things, and there's a saying that it takes a village to bring up a child, and you kind of think you know what that means until you actually really are in a village. And you know, you go to a braai, or as they call it, barbecue here. You go to a braai, and I don't even know where my child is, because he's running in the fields with the other kids and he's as happy as Larry. And, you know, everyone is looking after him, and this mom is bringing out a box of toys, and that mom's asking, can he have an ice cream? And, you know, and everyone knows everyone. And yes, obviously there's downsides to that, but the upside, the overriding upside is people care, and people want to support you. And you know, it really is an amazing experience.
We have 1 minute to go, so I think we need to cut it in. That's a great way to end it. Shannon, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's an amazing story, and I think it resonates with so many people through the corporate life and leaving the country and in search for what they're after. I think what you've illustrated is that if you clearly define what it is you want for your life, nothing's impossible. It may not be easy, but through some planning and direction, communication, you've shown that it's definitely possible to do, right? And lastly, from my side, you know, I'm all for living an amazing life, and I truly believe that we've got the power to orchestrate the life that you want to live. It just takes some extra effort. It's not going to be easy. It does take work. And if you're looking for somebody to partner with, then I'm your guy to help you do that. But Shan, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting. Thank you everybody for spending the morning with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks everyone. Cheers.